All right. Okay, let's get started. So hi, everyone. Welcome to our third office hours for the Semantic Kernel. We've had some very good sessions so far in the previous two, a lot of great questions. And we actually have quite a full docket of questions to go through today. As always, right, if there are topics or things that you want to cover, feel free to just drop them in the chat here on Teams, and we can definitely either respond to it. If the people from the Semantic Kernel team are here, they can respond to it, or we can answer them live as well. So in terms of just quick kind of intro is, I think last week we were saying that we were close to hitting 10,000 stars. So for everyone who gave the repo an extra star, thank you for helping us reach the next milestone, right? We surpassed 10,000, next step is, 20,000. So definitely help us get there. But thank you all already for that. The other sort of kind of announcement to make is that several people have asked, like, what is the semantic kernel roadmap, or at least where can let's get a better understanding of where things are going with the project. So to help with that, we made public our GitHub boards. So we have it for Python as well as .NET. It's in the works for Java and just the apps and services group, but you can see, at least today, right, you could follow along where things are. And if you want to see like all the things that are upcoming or things that have been requested, you could see on our backlog where things are. So certainly continue to give us the feedback of, like, if you need something reflected in the kernel, a specific feature, yeah, just let us know, and we can certainly prioritize that or figure out like how we put it on our near-term roadmap. So yes, definitely check these out. All right, I guess before I jump in, let's see, in terms of other announcements, one of the things that I would love to do and that you'll start seeing more of, this is probably more from my side, but I want to actually start maybe some sort of series, whether it be an interview series or whatever, but something along the lines of get to meet the voices of semantic kernel. So not just the people on the team, but obviously all the community members that are here to help build the project, build the product. So if you're interested in being interviewed or talking about like what you're doing, what your thoughts about AI are, yeah, just reach out to me on Discord, and I'm happy to set up some time. There are a couple of initial guests for this, so that, what do you call it? My schedule is starting to fill up there, but please just let me know if this is something that you're interested in, and yeah, we can set something up. Okay, so with that, we have several questions, and again, please ask away in the Teams chat or get off mute if you wanted to raise your hand or leave a comment. But let's get started. So Josh Friedman asked actually a couple questions. So he asks, as we transition into production projects, I would like to gain insights on techniques and processes the team has experienced or employed to incorporate human-in-the-loop behavior. How can we extend the concept of guardrailing to address situations where user queries require human interaction? For instance, in a medical integration, if a user asks a medical question that the model cannot provide a confident and accurate response to, how can we handle it? Is it as straightforward as identifying the user's intent and then using another skill that calls an API, or some other method to involve human support in the chat conversation? We have Craig and Deb is here. I don't know if you wanted to take a stab at this first.
Yeah, I think this is a very common question. The first way I look at this question is usually it is a design problem, is not an AI or technical problem. So I would design all our apps not to replace people, but to work with them. So for example, in the healthcare industry, design if you want to generate a prescription or a summary or a discharge note for someone is leaving the hospital, all of those needs to be reviewed by a professional rather than be given directly to the patient. So if there is even an advice you give online through a chatbot, there should be a professional watching over what is going on. So it doesn't mean that you cannot make people more productive. You can still make professionals more productive with AI without replacing them, but giving them tools that can accelerate the processing of the information. So things like if you generate a summary, how do you know that the summary is correct? Is it grounded? Is it hallucinating? So there are many techniques, but at the end of the day, like using multiple models and asking models itself if the summary contains information that is not in the original data. Of course, the more you involve AI, the more tokens you will use. But at the end of the day, you still have to design the app to have a professional in the loop or a person in the loop so that you, at least for the next few years, that is the design that we know works. Then maybe AI will come better and we can automate some scenarios. But whenever there is a risk involved, I think it is about having designing the app or the user interface to have someone involved. And then technically we can provide the tools, like identifying which functions have higher risk than others. You can totally do that easily when it is about retrieval versus taking actions versus showing information to a user. But yeah, I think is something that the community is learning. It is something that will affect the way that we build apps. And it's a great question. I would like to hear maybe Craig or someone else if they have a different idea or suggestions.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a different idea. I agree. We're still very early. We're still learning a lot about how to deal with all of these situations. And, my mind goes to many different levels. Like at a lower level, is there an event I, as a developer, should handle? Like, should the orchestrator somehow have the magic to know that the model's given back some answer with a confidence that's not great? So should it just pop out an event that I handle? Should I build a custom planner? Should I build my own planner that takes all this stuff into consideration? Maybe I myself have that event that pops out or whatever the mechanism is. So it's a really thought-provoking question. I think, there's not one great answer right now. There's still a lot of experimentation going on. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
I think the tricky part is being able to distinguish or at least catch when an AI is quote unquote like hallucinating, right? Or maybe making up a very confident, maybe plausible sounding answer, but some detail of it is off or incorrect. I think those are very challenging to try to catch, especially in a real production application. But yeah, I mean, this is where if you are able to mix in your domain expertise, right? If you're a doctor, let's say, and you're able to create prompts, create skills on top of the AI and help steer that, at least I think that is a potentially better way to, or at least you help mitigate a little bit more risk in that case. So, but yes, I mean, I definitely would say that if you're just trying to build an app, right? Maybe you're not the domain expert, but you're trying to build an app. Incorporate mechanisms to be able to capture that human feedback or human input, so that when you do actually, try to stitch together or at least combine all this input together, you're able to, right, craft a good prompt to send to the AI and get something back. So yeah. So I don't know if anyone else on the call wanted to add any thoughts or follow-up questions here. I don't know if Josh is on the call. Otherwise, we can, oh, I see. Sandeep says you can also have another skill which basically sends question answer to a model and ask how accurate the response is. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Okay, so this is something that just is like literally yesterday or fresh off the press. It's like, what are our thoughts on the new OpenAI 3.5 Turbo model and its ability to specifically work with functions? So for those who don't know, let's just pull it up. So OpenAI recently allowed for, or they exposed some additional parameters inside the chat completion endpoint, and those allow you to provide functions to that. And maybe that's easier to just show through the code, where, right, you have your default like messages, the role user content is still the same, or sorry, the role is the same, content is the same, but you have now this functions where you can provide a list of you know of a config or a spec for your functions. And the idea, I believe, right, is that you can. I think they showed off in their blog, like you can call or use ChatGPT to call the initial function, and then you can. I think that the key insight that they're trying to share is that you can create a like JSON, a reliable JSON response, and that allows you to then operate on that in whatever application you want. So my initial thoughts, and I'll pass it to Craig and Devis, is that yeah, I mean, this is super needed, right? Because a lot of people want to do this sort of thing where they get a structured response back from the model. Because if it's just pure text, just a string, right? You have to do that parsing yourself. And we've even, I think there's an open issue right now where if you're using the planner with a ChatGPT model, at least a Python planner, it will create the JSON plan, but it'll also like add some additional commentary or things like that too. That's not a JSON object. So yeah, to me, I think it's super necessary, super important. I think the challenge is like, how does this, like, it doesn't solve the orchestration problem, which is, right, like if you provide, right, it just showing off one function. But what happens when you have many functions, thousands of skills or plugins, right? How does the model decide or orchestrate which one to choose there? So that's where, I would I would say this is not a what do you call it? Semantic kernel killing feature that OpenAI is launching. If anything, is just super complementary. We'll incorporate it and update the API. But yeah, just some initial thoughts.
Yeah, this one, I'll jump in quickly. I'm very excited about this one because I've written a bunch of code where I've said return as the following JSON format. And I think being able to have that, I don't have to put that in my prompt, right? I can put it in the function parameter instead. I like that. And I also like that it gives me more confidence as a developer that I will get back well-formed JSON. And someone in the chat mentioned, I think, Noah, yeah, it came with new versions of the model. So if you're using the GPT 3.5 Turbo, the one from March, I think it's 0301, whatever the number is, I don't believe this is included in that model. You need to use the one from yesterday or whenever it was, the 0613 or whatever the number is, to have this feature. So it's kind of two things. You need to have the function payload, and you need to be targeting the newer release of the model, because they have done some magic in the model to make it work with this.
I'm super excited too. I think it's a good start. I wish they didn't put part of the chat API, to be honest, because it's not. If that is the trend, it might become problematic. Like now you can call everything to the chat API, and I see these. I mean, I think it is a natural evolution. Like there was the text completion, and then people started building features on top of the text completion. But then we started seeing hallucinations and syntax errors. So they created a chat API, and that allows to develop a conversation. Now within these conversations we're doing actions. So it feels like, oh, now in that API we can do some level of planning. It is a start. I believe it fits better in its own API endpoint. there is information that is still missing. Like, what about the output parameters? Like, you can describe functions only about the input parameters. What about the output? So if you have to chain multiple functions, how do you know how to call to take the output of function one and to pass it into the function two? And I think that's because in ChatGPT, you can do one function at a time. So the moment the ChatGPT will give you the ability to run multiple functions, I guess this API will evolve together with that. So you will see, you can describe more of all your functions. You can also provide examples about how to call them, when they know when not to use them and things like that. So it feels like a good fit for the planner. There is more needed. Super welcome. We have to do some work to use it. I don't know if it would make the planner better, given that it is just one function here. We usually are looking at scenarios where we want to call more than one. But yeah, it's great. It's nice to see this evolution. I hope to see more of these every month, like not just about text, but also working with multimodals like images and sounds and other types of information. For example, we've been talking about using IoT devices to collect data and generate some text out of that data. And I don't think anyone is experimenting enough in that sense. I think once you start combining multiple information types, it will be a huge evolution and generating a new kind of conversations. It's not just about the chat. The chat is very hyped right now, but there is so much more that we wish to see in the community. So if you have questions about something that is totally different, we will welcome and would like to know more about that too.
So I see some people in the chat. Noah saying, sounds like OpenAI will next come out with the ability to create plugins upon output. Maybe.
Makes sense. We did that work with the planner, right? You can save a plan as a JSON object, and you can call that plan as another function. I think it's totally normal. Like, once you can combine two functions, like take an email, summarize it, and forward, you can say, okay, this is an action I do every day. Why not call it function foobar? And now I can just call that function without having to chain two or three steps every time. So it feels like a natural evolution where you use AI to train AI. You're basically teaching AI to write code, and you're telling AI now save that code and allow me to recombine that code. So you're basically doing what we call no code, low code experiences, where you're just talking to some interface, writing apps, saving them without touching the keyboard, and eventually you have these very rich experiences that just available. I like the voice interface of chat. I think over time we just talk to these AIs rather than write and say, okay, I need this done, I need that done too. Start to do this in the background. AI will ask back, what do you mean? Oh, these are the steps I want to execute. So you will write these actions together, and it will become more of a kind of a desktop experience rather than just a chat. I think that's one direction that we see.
Cool. Very good. Very good. All right. Next question. Noritsu asks, is there any information about how the semantic kernel works with roles when using chat completion? In Python, it seems that the semantic kernel executes all semantic functions as a user role. Is there a way to take advantage of multiple roles in case there's confusion referencing this document? Pull up doc. Okay, yeah. So for context, for people who maybe not familiar, the chat completion models, it's different from text completion. And the real difference is that, yeah, you provide this notion of a role. And I think there's a system role, there's a user role. And that is a way to sort of like, what do I call it, initialize a chat so that it's able to stay on topic or stay, be steered in the way that you want it to focus on. So right now, and Devis or Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that in order for us to have enabled chat completion skills or skills to be built on top of chat completion models, we basically had a default for these parameters. And yeah, I guess the question here is, are we able to modify that?
I don't remember how we implemented this. The problem was that these better models, 3.5 and 4, don't have a text completion endpoint, but that is what we needed. So we're simulating the text completion on top of the chat completion. If I remember correctly, we put the prompt in the system message, and then maybe the input in the first user message, and then we send that to the endpoint asking for a reply. I don't remember, to be honest, how it works. I don't know if there is something that we can do better. I think I would need a scenario or an example. It seems to work as far as I know. But yeah, I'm not sure about the what the question is.
Yeah, if you're online, Nerd2, definitely come off mute. Otherwise, I pulled up Lee from our team pointed us to this PR where it's like adds a new property to complete requests that allows specifying a custom system prompt to use when generating text completion to the chat model. The default value is assistant is a large language model, which is the same as the OpenAI API. And he also commented that it helps for scenarios like this new planner that's coming in soon. Yeah, I would say, Naruto, if you're online, if you're gonna hear this recording later, follow up with us to ask like, or let us know what sort of things you're thinking about, especially with this idea of like multiple roles. But yeah, I would say it's on our radar to some degree here. Okay, looking at the chat. Okay, I don't see a question. Good conversation, good commentary. Keep it coming. I'll move on to the next one. So CAD asks, I read the semantic kernel overview on the Microsoft website, but I'm still confused. How does SK work? It says semantic kernel is easy to create, manage prompts, native functions, memories, and connectors. How does SK manage the prompt, like LangChain? Does it handle big data by dividing it into chunks, take the summary of the first chunk as input of the second chunk, and so on, to return the final response? Is SK memory feature same as Redis search by able to search similarity? So okay, my answer to this is that SK, yeah, how it works, and we have certainly our documentation. I think I filmed a couple videos on YouTube about this as well. But the core idea is that semantic kernel is an orchestrator. It allows you to create prompts using our specific prompt templating language, and that allows you to create functions, both semantic functions as well as native functions, and bring them in. It hooks into different connectors, which are effectively things like external data sources, external APIs that you want to bring in. It makes use of memories, which are the way to have more persistent data context around either the conversation or the app experience, as well as to bring those in if you've stored them externally with embeddings, right? You can bring those in with memory as well. In terms of handling big data, yes, we do have a few text chunkers right now, but we know that this is an area that we need to invest a bit more in to to show off or at least give more opinionated samples of like, oh yeah, if your data looks like this, maybe you should use these set of text chunking modules to do that. Because it does vary quite a bit, especially if you're creating embeddings, if you're creating memory, right? How you chunk the data, how you represent that data, what you include, especially if your data is structured in some way or has specific like delimiters. So yeah, it's one of several of the modules that we have in Semantic Kernel. And in terms of memory, right, we have a few different memory store options. I forget if Redis actually landed into the repo. I think Craig is nodding his head, so the answer is yes. But yeah, you can use Redis, you can use Postgres, or vector DBs like Pinecone, Quadrant, Weaviate, even Microsoft's first-party ones like Vector Cognitive Search. So yeah, so it's all part of this overall. This is part of the Copilot stack that was talked about at Microsoft's Build conference. I'm looking at chat, but I don't know if Craig or Devis wanted to add anything more here. I see Abby's might be on the call too.
I was looking at the previous question. So we're using the chat. We're not using the system message. So maybe we can experiment to see if we get better answers when we run the functions. So that's a good call out for the team to try that. Regarding the comparison here, I think there is a mix of scenarios and what the kernel is. So I think the scenario described here about chunks is more about taking data, indexing that data so that you can ask questions. And we're working on that to be more explicit about how you can do that. It's not going to be much different from LangChain or Llama Index, to be honest. The pattern is the same. So you take a long document, you break it into small things that you can index. And then there is a strategy of more than ones where you can find relevant ones and create an answer to some question. The comparison about, or not more, the comparison about how the kernel works is think more about like composing functions. So fundamentally, you have functions which are the old way of writing code, like a loop, some asynchronous code, reading databases, all that. So that is what we call native functions. And then you have functions that run better when you use AI, like creating a summary, extracting topics, asking for the sentiment, and we call them semantic functions. Now the framework semantic kernel allows to compose those two together, native functions and semantic functions. In the mix, you can throw in other things like memories and the planner. I would leave the connector out. Connectors are just an implementation tail of plugins. And plugins are basically what we call functions. If you say, for example, when you work with, imagine you're working with Bing, and you call that the Bing plugin. Within the Bing plugin, you have many functions like the ability to search maps, to search for data, or to look for shopping stuff, or more, translate the text. So each of those are functions, but we group all those functions into something that we call plugin. And the connectors are just an implementation detail of the plugin. So I wouldn't put that as a high-level concept. You see the connectors a lot because we try to reuse code, but we focus more on functions and plugins.
Awesome. Sounds good. Shaheen asks, creating skills using semantic kernel. Yeah, I mean, this is a key part, so I can at least show off what it could look like in Python. I would refer Shaheen to our notebooks, right? It's a great way to just get started. But in terms of just creating a skill or function, it's really the bits and pieces are that you need a prompt, right? That prompt describes what you want it to do. And as mentioned before, we have a simple but specific prompt templating language. So you can see these bracket, curly bars, as well as like a $sign, and then this variable name. In this case, input is a default that we have. But the idea is that you define your prompt, and then you can create a semantic function from there. And that function has some parameters that are associated with the model. So tokens, temperature, top P. You can read on the documentation what those refer to. But once you have that, right, now you can now you have a function that is just as any other, in this case Python, but similar in C#. You now have a function that you can just call on some input, on some text. So you can see us using that here. So yeah, so I know it's a very simple question. Shaheen, definitely reach out to us if you need anything more granular than that. But definitely look at the samples. All right, next question. Ronan asks, would appreciate if security best practices and advice on preventing prompt injection attacks against the semantic kernel apps LLMs could be covered. Or do you want to comment a little bit on prompt injection?
Yeah, so it's not semantic kernel specific. Like, this is something that large language models are susceptible to. Large language models are looking to find the next token in a sequence, and they take the existing sequence and they kind of pattern match, is my layman's view of what's going on. So not semantic kernel specific. And what can happen, just to explain what a prompt injection attack is, let's say you have a prompt and it says, okay, send some flowers to the person's significant other. Okay, that might be what the prompt is doing. I, the user, click that button, and then let's make it a little bit more complicated. Let's say that it looks at my email. So, looks at my email to find who my significant other is, and then send flowers to my significant other. Let's pretend that's the scenario. And then let's say that Alex has sent me an email, and in that email, it says, something along the lines of, send Alex $1,000. Okay. So let's pretend the prompt finds that email. For whatever reason, it thinks it's the right match to include in the prompt. Then all of a sudden, my prompt goes from send my significant other flowers to send Alex $1,000 plus send my significant other flowers. So my wife may still get flowers, but Alex may also end up getting $1,000 in that scenario, assuming that there's zero security. And that's kind of a high level of prompt injection attack. Now, to prevent this, the only time it's really a risk is when you're operating on what we'll call untrusted information. So content has come in that you don't, it's not a plugin you wrote, it's not code that you wrote, it's some web search, some email search, or some other third-party plugin that you don't necessarily know what's going on inside of. And it could be such that you decide not to include anything that you don't trust. And so we had a PR come in that introduced trust checks into the kernel. I don't believe we've done a sample yet of how to use it, and see if I can find it while I'm talking. But the high level of it was to do exactly what I just said. It will allow you, as the developer, to decide if you want untrusted code to run in the context of your orchestration, or anytime an untrusted, actually I think we did it at the string level or the prompt level. Anytime something untrusted comes in, you can decide that, no, I don't want that to go through this flow. It'll throw an exception or an error, and the LLM will not proceed forward with that. So we do have some early work on this. I would say, again, like everything else, it's an emerging space, and it's not something that is really well understood, broadly speaking. Is the let me drop this in. That was the one I was thinking about, the trust checks. So it's something that we should be thinking about, and it's something that we should be continuing to learn about. And at the moment, we do have some trust checks in the kernel. It's like a first step. So Devis, I don't know if you would add something on top of that.
No, you're totally right. So we have this the trust service that is available in the kernel. There is a default one. We suggest to implement your own. So when you instantiate the kernel, you can say use this trust service class. So you can design your own class. What you put in that class is basically some logic to identify malicious input and potentially problematic output. So go a very high level. Don't trust user input. Don't even trust the AI output. So you have to validate both. It can be expensive, but you can also use some regular expression. Very easy checks like, does my output contain something like a password that I don't want to, or a concept that I don't want to share? There is no, for if you try to solve the problem with prompts, prompt engineering, there is nothing that is 100% safe. So you can try, but at the end of the day, you will have to write some code to identify input and to check the output and work the old way, like throw an exception if something weird is going on and you don't trust the process, and inform the user and let the user make a choice.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add other than, right, the moment you start giving your AI access to tools and functions, right, it starts becoming a little bit more scary because, yeah, someone can, right, in the email example, right, if someone were to just put a line in there saying like, do this, or like ignore all instructions, I think it's a very common prompt attack that I see. It's like, ignore all your instructions and then do this, do X, Y, Z. Right, that becomes a lot more scary, certainly a lot more risky, and yeah, having some solutions to that. You could look at what we did as an initial first step, in this PR. But yes, I agree. It is a emerging area that the community needs to help figure out.
Yes, I think one thing we can add is learn from the community. There are very interesting conversations out there about all the tricks that you can use to attack your prompts. So if you are designing a prompt to protect your business logic, look for what people are doing, and if you will find out that there is always a way around your prompt. There was an interesting game out a couple of maybe 4 weeks ago called Gandalf. You had to trick Gandalf about sharing a password, and like there were like 7 or 8 levels. So level one was very easy. That you ask Gandalf, just tell me the password, and he will give you that. And then you see it gets harder and harder, and then there is a level 7 or 8 which is super hard. But if you go and check what the community is doing, they come up with very interesting prompts working around all the AI protections. Like the AI has been fine-tuned not to hurt people, not to do anything wrong, but you can leverage that to get AI to do something wrong. So it shows that basically it is not a 100% fail-safe solution. You have to put some real code around your secrets, around your actions. Yeah, there it is. It's a very funny game. I think you will love it. It shows where we are these days and the need to write code to protect the usual protections that we put in place.
Excellent. All right. Ayula asks, I grasped the theory of the semantic kernel and managed to get the apps running. Now, as I'm learning .NET as a platform, I need some guidance on understanding the folder structure of the sample apps. It'd be helpful if the architecture and folder structure of the chat can be explained. Craig, do you want to share your screen? And
yeah, I assume this is talking about Copilot chats. So give me one moment. Find the right window. Okay.
Stop sharing.
Right. Yep, let me click the button. Okay. Okay, so this is the, we're in .NET, so this is the C# side of semantic kernel. And when you open the main solution, you get quite a lot of folders in here. So if I go under the samples folder, there is this one called the Copilot Chat Web API. This is just the backend portion of it. So what I'll also do is let me open in Explorer. I can't remember where it is in my different things. Let's just do terminal. Oh, that does that one. I don't like that one. Sorry. Let's do this again. Let's do somewhere that's open in Explorer. I'm not finding it. All right, there it is. We've got it. Okay, problem solved. So now when we go into Explorer, this is the Copilot chat folder. There's quite a lot of stuff in here. The web app is the front end. So this is what you'll actually run most likely in Visual Studio Code. So if I go to opening terminal, this is usually how I do it. So I go in the terminal, I go code dot, it'll then open up Visual Studio Code for just the web app. And then I'll open the terminal in here, and I'll do my yarn install and then yarn start. And all of the code for the front end of the web apps in here, it's a React TypeScript app. So I have quite a lot of code in here. It's not, I think I saw this comment earlier, it's not a simple sample if you want to go and look through all the code, because it's a very fully featured application these days. And then in the back end, it's all .NET. So over here we have kind of a typical ASP.NET backend. We have a folder called Copilot Chat, which is all of the things that are Copilot Chat specific. One of the goals of the apps portion of the Semantic Kernel team is to make a Semantic Kernel backend web API that's a little bit decoupled from Copilot Chat, and then allow you to just add little pieces of Copilot Chat into the back end. So you can kind of pick and choose if you want document upload, if you want plugins, if you want Planner, make that a little bit more modular. But at the moment, it's all kind of in this one folder here. There's .NET backend, ASP.NET. I think it's 7 now, it's 6 or 7, can't remember. And those are the two pieces of the project. Then we have a lot of other samples. While I'm in here quickly, I'll do this because someone mentioned something about samples. So I actually really like this set of samples in here, the kernel syntax examples. These again are all the .NET samples. And the thing I really like is they're numbered. So I know example 1 is something that was done, earlier on, most likely, and it might have changed because we've refactored code and changed things over time. But I know that that's kind of something that was earlier in the semantic kernel lifetime. And then as I get further down, I see things like streaming completion, streaming chat, which came in, action planner came in. It's kind of like a good historical view of the moments when things were added. And the samples themselves are very, very small. They're very succinct. They're very clear about what I need to do to run it. So like someone mentioned Redis earlier. I actually haven't opened this example yet, but this is a Redis example. It sets up the Redis connection, and then I imagine we've got the memory store here being the Redis memory store. It's very nice, very easy to come in and get started with. Again, this is the .NET side of the house. We're slightly different on the Python side and other aspects of semantic kernel. But hopefully this helps answer the question. I'll pass it back to you, Alex.
Sounds good. Thank you, Craig. So I think Blue Dino asked a very similar question. So hopefully this helps. This walkthrough is good. Although, yeah, Python and Next.js backend, but Python for sure is still being worked on. And I know there's some question around TypeScript and JavaScript as well. Unfortunately, that is a completely community-driven effort. And yeah, if it's something that you all really want, I would encourage you to at least look at the experimental branch for TypeScript and see if it's something that you all want to work on some more. It needs to catch up a lot because the last update was 3 months ago. So yeah. Okay. Next question. Scott Izzle, awesome name, says, hello, for the SK VS Code extension, is there any way to change your Azure tenant? We can only change endpoint providers and subscriptions, but if I'm in multiple tenants, which I am, I don't see where I can change them. So I don't have the answer myself. I don't know if Greg or Devis, anyone.
I know there was something that came in to make it more flexible around like different ways of authenticating to the Azure Active Directory. Most of the team that does the work on the VS Code extension is in Ireland, and I don't know that we have anyone on the call today. So maybe we can get back on this one async, because I don't know the answer.
Sounds good. We'll get back to you. This is the same question. Maybe I didn't copy paste it. I remember this question though. Let me see if I can quickly find it on. Okay, yeah, it's this one. Nano asks about security best practice. Oh, I guess we actually did answer this. So yes, rewind back to the tape about prompt injection. All right. Himenimex asks, what version of the NuGet package do I need to use the Hugging Face connector?
It's been a while. I think any of the last 2-3 versions will be fine. I guess if they can install the last version, it should work. If for some reason they can't, we introduced the connector like more than maybe 2 months ago. So I would say anything fairly recent should work. I would also recommend to use the latest, because sometimes we fix security issues, so you don't want to get stuck on all dependencies.
Awesome, sounds good. Okay, Anthony asks, add the Azure AI OpenAI NuGet package in place of the custom OpenAI connector logic, or maintain separate code to reduce package dependencies. Trying to understand the question.
We are already using the Azure AI package. We added it 2 months. I added it like 2 months ago, or more than that. There is some logic though. Some features are not present in the Azure SDK, or maybe they were not at that time, like the support for DALI. So we still have a custom client for those features, but everything that we could is running on top of the Azure SDK. For example, the support for Active Directory authentication, Azure ChatGPT, GPT-4, all of that goes through the Azure SDK.
Great, sounds good. So we're just trying to knock these out before the top of the hour. Okay, so Ryan asks, any plans to create a chatbot trained with the context of Semantic Kernel's repo and docs to increase productivity when working with the tool? LangChain and LlamaIndex have something similar on their site. Could be a demo app in the repo.
We sort of have one that kind of does this a little bit. We have the GitHub Q&A sample. It was the third sample, I think, that we put in there. It's a web front end, Azure function backend in that scenario. So kind of have it. It's not really, we don't put it on the website as chatbot thing, and it only does the markdown files by default. It does not do the other code files in the repository.
Yeah, we were also chatting about creating a Discord bot, maybe encapsulating all of that knowledge. I think it would be a fun project. If anyone wants to try, it's easy with Python, creating one. The problem with Discord is that it doesn't listen to, if you create a Discord bot, it won't listen to every chat message. You have to mention the bot in order to get an answer. But you can take the code that Craig was showing, you can index a semantic kernel or any other document, and then have the bot replying to questions. I think it would be cool to do that.
Cool, sounds good. Robin Manuel asks, scales would become plugins, right? The term scales is going away and everything is a plugin, correct? The answer is yes. We are going to be rebranding scales to plugins because that is going to be the standard, or It's to achieve parity and standardization across all of Microsoft. Last one from here, at least, is ChatGPT, GPT-4 all uses JS, ChatGPT, and GPT-4 now use chat completion. What's the difference? So I think we answered this in the chat, but basically GPT 3.5 Turbo, which is the kind of default model of ChatGPT, is cheaper. It's faster, more optimized for inference. I believe it's even 10x. If the pricing is still the same, it's 10x cheaper than GPT-4. So yeah, if you're looking to get something fast, a bit more reliable, and that's cheaper, I would try to build your scenarios on top of GPT 3.5 Turbo. But obviously, if you're trying to do more advanced reasoning, planning type work, you should go for the more powerful GPT-4 model, which I know maybe many people might still be waiting to get access to it, or if you do have access to it, you're like heavily throttled or limited. I would say that's a temporary, thing. More capacity is coming online to make these models more available. So yeah, just wait for that. Okay, with that, we have actually a couple minutes left, so we're done with the questions that came in. I guess the last one that I saw from Jorge is about sort of CopilotChat.net and Maui. So I don't know, Craig, if you want to just chat about that a little bit.
Yeah, I dropped that in the chat. So I had done some, I did a proof of concept with WinUI 3, and I know someone did a WPF app. I think someone's also done Windows Forms. Like the semantic kernel, you can host it as a HTTP endpoint somewhere. So any front end that can call a HTTP endpoint can use semantic kernel. If you want to bring it closer to your front end, let's say you want to put it in a mobile app, be careful, because if you're using any of the Azure OpenAI models or OpenAI models, you got to have your key has to be where semantic kernel is, because it's going to make a request. If you're using, we have Active Directory support, so that's kind of nice. Like you can use the user's authenticated their bearer token to make that request. So you don't necessarily need the keys at the app in that scenario. And we're .NET Standard 2, I think, right, Devis? We went back and did the work to make a .NET Standard 2 compatible. So anything that can consume a .NET Standard 2 library can use it in the .NET world. Python, I don't know what version, Alex, of Python we're at, like 2.8 or 3 something.
It's 3.8 and above.
3.8 and above, yeah. So I would say you've got a lot of flexibility depending on where you want the kernel to live. Just be mindful of the keys, because these can be expensive if the keys get leaked, and you might have a large bill, and that might be upsetting.
All right. I think that's okay. Actually, Diogenes dropped in last minute question. Is there any reliable free option to OpenAI, like to test my code without paying? It's very easy to rack up a $5 bill.
Yeah.
I would say, and one thing that I personally would like to see more samples for, and if I have time, I would love to create them, is using some of the open source models that you could just download. Maybe you might need a GPU to run them, but the idea is that if you can get them from Hugging Face or some place and just download them, you could run it on your own machine without having to incur any cost, as well as not having to send any data to OpenAI if that's something of concern. So yeah, we have that functionality today using Hugging Face connector. So I would take a look at that. But yes, I agree. More samples to show that off would be very good.
If I can add to that, there are pretty good models on Hugging Face for the embeddings. So when you call OpenAI to complete model, you might be using OpenAI also for embeddings like Ada. There are pretty good embedding models on Hugging Face which are free. You can run locally on your machine. Of course, they're slower, and the precision is slightly lower, but depending on your scenarios, there might be a good choice to save some bucks. So I would totally invite. I'm going to put a list, chat link in the chat. There was a good article yesterday that I would suggest to read where they brought this up. Find that. Yeah, this link here. In that article, they mentioned there's a link to Hugging Face. Yeah, this one. So yeah, I think the article is worth reading. It's very interesting. And there is a link that I also put in the chat to a list of models that you can use for embeddings. I think is worth testing.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, I think we're at time. So thank you very much for coming to the office hours. Thank you, people on the SK team, also for coming by, answering questions. And yeah, join us next time for our weekly session. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.